You are watching an MLGA Network live broadcast. The only people for me are the mad ones.
The world is filled with the boring and the barely conscious.
The misery loves company.
But we don't have to live this way.
Jessica and I are here to talk to those the system rejects, to radicals and thought criminals.
The ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but push the boundaries of acceptable discourse.
Those who stare reality in the face and dare it to be different.
History isn't made by the timid, and fun is not had by the perpetually afraid.
We are the mad ones.
So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Mad Ones. I'm your idiot bearded host who didn't take the time to write in an introduction to this episode for some freaking reason, Cam Harless. And with me as always is your doesn't like meat but needs a lot of protein hostess, Miss Jessica Green.
How do you do?
Jessica?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you. No, I eat meat. I just don't care for it like it's everybody's favorite food. And I just
It's like you're speaking a language I don't understand, and I am not into it. But since I don't have a list of things to say, I'm just going to introduce our guest tonight, who is one of my buddies from the internet. He is the he works with the 10th Amendment Center. He works with Shift Gold and manages all of the content on that website. He does the Friday Gold Wrap podcast with Shift Gold. He has two other podcasts, I think. He may have another one I don't know about, but he has Godarchy, and he also has Thoughts from Maharrey Head that he has not updated lately, and I miss it. But beyond that, this is a man who works tirelessly for the cause of freedom. He fought the Kentucky government over some cameras that shouldn't have been there. He needed the information, and they said no. He fought him anyway. This is a good guy. He is an expert on the Constitution, wrote a book about it, Constitution Owner's Manual. I just love him. Welcome, Mike Maharrey.
Hi. That was a good intro for winging it. You got everything correct.
Man. Oh, thank God.
Except, well, Thoughts of Maharrey Head's pretty much dead at this point. It's a dead head.
I know, but I still love the name so much
clever,
that I can't mention it.
Yeah,
I love the name.
The credit for that has to go to my daughter. She actually came up with the name. She thought it'd be funny, and I was like, actually, that works. So
I have always said your last name as Maharrey based on the name of that podcast, and then I've heard people say Maharrey so many times lately.
Yeah,
and I'm like, have I been wrong?
No, they're wrong. It's
Thank
Maharrey.
God, that's what I thought, and I
don't know how you get Maharrey out of it, but whatever.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know where they think your family's from, but they're wrong.
Yeah.
So how are you doing? It's been a minute. I had to really rack my brain to come up with some sort of title for this, because I made the perfect title for the episode the first time you were on, which was Dirty Maharrey.
Yes.
And I don't know where to go from there. I keep trying, and
yeah. Sometimes sometimes you just got to admit that you hit perfection on the first try, and it's just,
I peaked, man.
Yeah, you peaked. And that's it.
So to get us started, we were talking a little bit about pissing off our audience, because I think that both of us are in the same vein when it comes to that, because just the other day, a federal judge out of San Diego decided a case that was it was essentially the Gun Rights Association or something like that had sued the state of California because they thought that the assault weapons ban was unconstitutional and that it should be overturned. And so you hear this, and for me, there's this tension because, I'm an anarchist and I believe in gun rights, absolutely. And I'm like, hey, my good friend Aaron can now get that AR-15 that he wants. So I'm like, that's awesome. And then there's this other part of me that was the kid who studied originalist constitutionalism for a couple of years, who's like, but it's the judge was actually unconstitutional. So you want to piss some people off?
If we must. Yeah, I'm of the mind that you should never celebrate a politically connected lawyer in a black dress
Yes.
granting you some right. And
Mhm.
everybody's all excited. First off, you have to remember that this is a district judge.
Yes.
So it's going to go to the Court of Appeals. It will go to the Ninth Circuit, I believe, which is probably one of the most progressive of the court circuit. So they're going to overturn him.
Yes.
And then
Absolutely.
it might go to the Supreme Court, which is what everybody hopes. And the Supreme Court might take it, and they might decide that this judge is correct. But then again, they might not. And here's my problem with it. If they decide not, and I feel like that 9 times out of 10, the federal court system is more interested in protecting government than it is protecting individual rights. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a crappy decision from a federal court.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, once that happens, it's going to apply to the entire United States. So what is really fundamentally an issue in California suddenly becomes a precedent that applies to me here in Florida.
Mhm.
So I am a firm believer that the biggest threat to my liberty is centralized power. And you're not going to centralize power and ultimately get liberty. You're going to centralize power and ultimately get more tyranny. So you might get some breadcrumbs from the federal courts. They might get it right. Maybe, just maybe, possibly, I doubt it, but maybe they'll come up with a Supreme Court decision someday that says that this assault weapons ban is unconstitutional. But if I had to bet, I'm not a betting man, but if I was a betting man, I would bet that's not going to happen. But even if it does, the other 90 court cases that go to the Supreme Court, you're going to get screwed over, and it's going to apply to the entire United States. I can give you all kinds of examples. Recently, we've seen a lot of debate about qualified immunity, which is this legal doctrine that gives police officers the ability to basically violate individual rights at will. And it's impossible to sue them because they are covered by this doctrine called qualified immunity. This is purely an invention of the Supreme Court. This isn't any kind of state law. It's not even a law at all. It is a Supreme Court doctrine that has evolved over time that effectively protects police officers. So what's happening now is you're seeing a lot of states pass laws that create a pathway to sue police officers under the state constitution, which all state constitutions incidentally have a Bill of Rights. And instead of suing it in federal court, you sue in state court, and then they can actually put a provision in the law that says qualified immunity is not a defense. Because if it goes to federal court, you're going to have the qualified immunity defense that pops up. So that's just one example of how the courts, along with this incorporation doctrine, which basically tries to apply the federal Bill of Rights to every state, ends up screwing over basically everybody in the country. No-knock warrants is another example of a court-created doctrine that has been applied to all states. So, California is in an unfortunate position when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms because their constitution doesn't really have any provision for that. And in my opinion, instead of risking my watering down my ability to have an assault weapon, why don't you people in California take care of your own business and amend your constitution or, leave or something? I don't know. I just, bottom line is the centralization of power is not going to ultimately get you liberty. It might get you a breadcrumb here and there, but ultimately it's going to end up screwing you over. And really the only thing that we have in the United States that protects us at all from overreaching government is the concept of federalism, the fact that states do have some autonomy and that they can push back against federal power. And the more you use the incorporation doctrine in the federal courts, the more that gets washed away, and the more it becomes this one centralized national power where either Donald Trump or Joe Biden is calling all the shots. And I just don't see that as a pathway to liberty. So,
Well, it makes me think of that conversation I've had with, Suzanne Sherman.
I do
that
know
I've had
Suzanne.
with
I love
her
Suzanne.
a few. Me too. I miss her. But a few times we've talked about constitutional carry and how much we despise that term because I was having a conversation with someone the other day and they were like, "Oh, I want constitutional carry. I love it. I love them talking about constitutional carry." And I'm like, "No, permitless carry is a better way to put it."
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're telling them what weapon to use against you to overturn it.
Right.
which they're going to use the Constitution and the 14th Amendment, and they're gonna screw you. So how about you not call it that?
Yeah. Well, and that's, that gets to a deeper issue, and that's a mistake a lot of people make. This
Mhm.
idea that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is somehow giving
Mhm.
you rights.
Yeah.
And, that was never the intent. The Bill of Rights, when it was written, was simply a further restriction on federal power. That's what it was intended to do. It
Mhm.
was to make clear that the federal government cannot take any actions that infringe upon these rights that were already assumed to exist.
Yes.
And then state constitutions have their own Bill of Rights, which were meant to prevent states from doing things that infringe upon these rights that, again, already exist. The rights are considered to be already in place. But a lot of people just think, oh, the Second Amendment's there, so therefore I have the right because the Second Amendment says so. That's dumb. Government didn't give you rights. And if the government is what's giving you rights, then you've got a lot bigger problem than some judge in California.
Yeah, that's a fun thing, because I think Monica Perez was on my show at one point. I don't know if you were there for that one or not, Jessica, but I had said that the Bill of Rights was a mistake, and the look on her face was so funny, because like, there are good things that came from the Bill of Rights, but I consider that and we the people as two, what have been, at least the Bill of Rights has become a really terrible lie that makes people believe that our rights come from government.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it's a mistake, because it's like, sure, we can kick the can down the road with the Bill of Rights, but at the end of the day, like, how many people do you talk to on a daily basis who believe their right to own a weapon to protect themselves comes from the Second Amendment?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
I know a lot of them. Yeah, exactly. My Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wonder if this presents kind of an argument against the idea of like coalition building with like the major parties, because you hear that all the time lately, where they say, well, you can have a coalition with somebody in the Republican Party based on one issue. But if it's so easy to be fooled into thinking something like what happened in California is a victory when it's not actually a victory, when it actually leads down the road to us having less rights, I wonder if that's kind of an argument against getting entangled in that way.
I don't know. I mean, I think it really comes down to education, and that's why, I'm an anarchist. I hate the term anarchist. I usually use the term voluntarist.
Mhm.
So, I'm the weirdo voluntarist who wrote a book about the Constitution because I'm supposed to hate the Constitution. And I can make the argument that the Constitution has no like moral or ethical authority because of consent. I can make all those arguments. And yes, I've read Spooner. Other anarchists like to try, oh yeah, Spooner. Like, that's a mystery to me. Like, I've never heard that.
But you can use it as a weapon.
Yeah.
You can take their weapon and use it against them.
Exactly. But I mean, I think it's important for people to understand. I mean, a lot of what people think they know about the Constitution is erroneous. It's
Mhm.
been, it's not taught. So that's one of the things that the 10th Amendment Center does, is we teach the original meaning, the original understanding, the original purposes of these things. Because, as far as government systems go, the constitutional system as it was conceived is actually not bad. I mean, it's certainly a hell of a lot better than what it's evolved into.
Mhm.
But going back to this idea of coalition building, if you do have the right principles and you understand what you're doing, then I think coalition building can be very valuable. I think it's just very important to understand who you are making your coalitions with,
Right.
and making sure that the end goal that you are trying to achieve is going to be a positive net win for liberty. So I do a lot of coalition.
Murray Rothbard believed in.
Well, yeah, exactly. I do a lot of coalition building with folks on the left with surveillance and police issues. And they may be coming at it from, a different reason. If you ever read like the real hardcore lefty objection to surveillance, it's usually couched in terms of racism and inequity and those types of things. And I don't think that they're necessarily invalid arguments, but I don't think they're the best arguments. But regardless, if we can get a bill passed or an ordinance passed that limits surveillance in some way, shape, or form, I'm all for that. So I work with anybody who in the world who wants to work on that. Same thing with something like asset forfeiture. So there are a lot of things where we can work with this, and we do work with folks on the right with guns, but we do it in a different way. So the 10th Amendment Center strategy is really pushing bills like the one that passed in Arizona this year that prohibits the enforcement of certain aspects of federal gun control by state and local police. So you're kind of cutting off part of that enforcement. And of course, the federal government depends on state and local governments to do just about everything. So we have a tremendous amount of power to limit the scope of federal overreach by simply not cooperating with them. And so that's really what we do at the 10th Amendment Center. We'll work in coalitions, and we'll work with gun rights, Second Amendment people on that issue. And we just try to stay away from the court stuff. I think sue in federal court is the dumbest political strategy in the entire world. We're gonna go to this thing that is part of the federal government and try to get it to limit the federal government. It's like
madness.
The analogy that I've used in my book is if it's a football game and I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, I'm going to have the New York Giants player be the referee in the game. That's basically what people are doing. We're gonna have the government investigate the government. That'll fix things. Jesus.
The FBI has investigated the FBI and found that the FBI was not at fault.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Or you go to Lexington, Kentucky, and your government will sue you.
Here's the thing. Mentioning the FBI, I was talking to Monica earlier today. There was this story. So, speaking of the Constitution, the feds hate the Fourth Amendment.
Of course.
That's very, very clear. Look at the NSA. Look at the different. Look what you fought in Lexington.
Yeah.
Well,
and I'll tell you this: the Fourth Amendment is one of the things. If you really want to start looking at where the federal courts have eroded away constitutional protection and applied that to all over the country, the Fourth Amendment is the prime example of that. There are so many things that the federal government has said, oh, this is fine if local police do this. And, if in a decentralized system, at least each state court would have to F it up, as opposed to the, central authority effing it up for everybody. But yeah, the Fourth Amendment is one of the most watered down and bastardized amendments that exists.
Well, one of the things, I guess in some sense, the Constitution has protected us in that way, because the FBI really hates encryption. They hate encrypted messaging. They hate that people can talk and that they can't get a back door. And a lot of the American companies, Signal and even Apple, has put up a fight, or at least looked like they've put up a fight. But the other day, this news article came out where the FBI had pressured a criminal into letting them use the company Anom, that I don't know how he had access to it at all, but essentially what they did is they made a bunch of devices that used encrypted messaging, and they made 12,000 devices, and they gave them to all of these different criminal organizations, motorcycle clubs and stuff like that. But they did it in European countries and in Australia because they probably couldn't get away with that in the United States.
Right.
And so what had happened is in Australia and these other places, they had banned the encrypted messaging services. And so the guys in the FBI and these police agencies in other countries used their confidential informants to give these devices to the top dogs in these criminal organizations. And so they had this encrypted app, which hilariously enough, they had to pay for monthly in order to use.
Right.
And so they were telling all the stuff they were going to do, how they were going to kill people. Right. They showed pictures of cocaine hidden in bananas or whatever, like all this different stuff. And these organizations were just reading these texts and arresting people.
Yeah.
It was like Minority Report, but in real life.
I bet you dollars to donuts that's happening here.
I would bet as well.
Sure.
I bet it's called something else.
They'll make it quiet. So there's the thing that we actually know about. It's called parallel construction. And so, not to get too far into the weeds on the technical aspect of it, but basically what happens is the NSA or local police, whoever it is, will illegally get information. A lot of times this is information that comes from the NSA that is passed on to state and local law enforcement through these fusion centers and what they call the information sharing environment. And what they'll do is they'll get evidence, but they can't use it because they don't have a warrant. So they'll use that evidence to actually create the probable cause to get a warrant, and then create this parallel investigation using legally obtained information, but they had already gotten the information illegally to begin with. And this is the thing. I mean, we know this is happening. Bill Binney, who is a former NSA security officer, has talked about this. So, they do stuff like this. They just have to be a little bit more circumscribed by it. It's like the whole thing with the Stingray devices, which are these clever little tools that law enforcement has that will actually, they spoof a cell phone tower. And so if one of these cell site simulators is in your vicinity, it will force your phone to lock onto it instead of the nearest cell tower. And then once it's locked in, the police can access your data. They can listen to phone calls. They can track your location. These things are being used by law enforcement. And when police departments buy them, they are required. I'm sure they do it gladly, but they have to sign non-disclosure agreements that they won't even tell anybody that they have these things. And there's actually been incidents where prosecutors have dropped cases because they would rather let a criminal go than, admit that they're using these tools. So this stuff is happening in secret all over. The surveillance is one of the most pervasive and horrible things that our government is doing. I think Snowden just hit the tip of the iceberg. I noticed today that Joe Biden made a comment that was obviously about Snowden. He was going through the litany of horrors that the Russians are doing and hiding these cyber terrorists.
Yeah,
I'm sure Snowden.
That reminds me of the Enigma machine during World War II, where they had cracked this code that the Germans were using.
Mhm.
And so they were able to access the movements of the German troops and their navy and all that kind of stuff. But because they didn't want the Germans to know that they had the code, they had to allow ships to be sunk, including ships full of civilians.
Yeah.
And so it makes you wonder how much of this criminal activity do they let go on, may be harmful to regular people just to preserve their. Also, I think I know what you're about to say, which is the FBI ran the biggest pedophile website on the internet.
Right.
In an effort to catch pedophiles. And then after their whole operation had gone down, they left the website up and it continued for a while. I don't know if it's still up now. Probably
Yeah.
not.
I think it was
Hopefully
like
not.
6 months.
But it continued to be the largest pedophile website on the internet, and it was
Right.
run by our own government.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, stuff like this happens all the time. It's
Yeah.
anybody who trusts the government is absolutely nuts. I was listening to a episode of, do y'all know the Dangerous History podcast?
That's CJ,
No,
right?
sounds
CJ
up my
Gilmer,
alley,
yeah.
though.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
awesome. And he's been releasing some old back episodes, and I'd listened to one today when I was working out about how the various government agencies, mostly connected with the Manhattan Project and the development of nuclear weapons back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, did radiation experiments on unwitting people.
Operation Sunshine, right?
Yeah, well, there was a number of them that were done, but yeah, that was one of them. So yeah,
That reminds me of the Tuskegee experiment, where they were injecting black men in the
Yep.
South with
That's
syphilis.
every time
Unwitting.
every time anybody asks my wife why she doesn't want to take the vaccine, she says, "Have you heard of Tuskegee?"
There you go. And the program continued for something like 40 years.
Yeah.
And they had to be sued to stop it.
Did you see recently? I'm sorry, I'm so full of news. I've been on the propaganda report, so I have news in my head. But the other day, did you the Colonial Pipeline hack?
Yeah.
The ransomware attack that happened. The other day, it came out that the FBI just happened upon the private key to the wallet that the dark side hackers used to get the Bitcoin.
Yeah, I saw an article, the headline, and never did read the article. But I was like, huh.
Yeah, they just happened to find it. And it's funny because, and I mentioned this on the propaganda report, but the week before the ransomware attack on Colonial Pipeline happened, there was a report done by the ransomware task force or something that was a part of it's some non-political organization that's like filled with all like deep tech
Right.
people. And the week before, they put out a report on how to combat ransomware, and like page 14 and on was all about cryptocurrency, how it needed to be regulated, how deeply it needed to be regulated. And then you see just recently from the left's talking points, Elon Musk is not using Bitcoin with Tesla anymore because of climate change. And then 3 days ago, Donald Trump comes out and says that Bitcoin's a scam and it's trying to be competition to the dollar. And so he's talking to like the people on the right who don't know much about this, making them want to be against Bitcoin.
Right.
And it's like that plus this encryption thing and how much they hate that gives me hope, because right now the technology is outclassing the government to the point where they're having to make up stories about how they found a private key, because I don't believe that they found a private key. Come on.
You know, but
that's
you know
good.
what's coming down the pike though is the central bank digital currencies.
Yes.
The
DigiYuan's already out there.
Yeah, the digital yuan. Sweden has a digital currency, and there's already some papers that are getting ready to come out about a digital dollar, because they want
there is US dollar coin that's available on Coinbase right now.
Yeah. Well, this is the war on cash is a whole different interesting subject. You know, I mean, obviously I'm not a big fan of cash because it's fiat. And paper valueless, but if I'm going to have fiat currency, I do want it to have paper because, you know, I can use that anonymously.
Yeah. Well, and that's the argument. That's what I brought up to Monica. It's like every argument against anarchy is the same arguments that are used against Bitcoin and cryptocurrency right now, is that it's anonymous and that criminals use it. And I'm like, oh, you mean like cash, which is the status quo? You're arguing against the status quo. That is what cash is.
Right.
And they want to get rid of that too, though, the digidollar. So
they want to control everything. And that's what's kind of creepy about the whole idea of central bank digital currencies, because, you know, it goes into your digital wallet, and then if your social score isn't up to par, well, you know, sorry, Cam, you can't buy groceries this week, you know?
Right. Well, and that was kind of the not buying groceries thing, was like the DeSantis saying no vaccine passports. There are a lot of people who are against that on principle because he was telling private companies not to do that. But at the same time, the federal government wanted to implement that across the board. And then he's saying no, and I just want to be able to buy groceries without having to prove my vaccine status. So I mean, in the realm of like having to choose the best of two bad choices, that is my choice. Let me buy my groceries, please.
Yeah, exactly.
But you work with Shift Gold.
I do.
And Jessica has 2 half questions from her husband.
All right.
Yeah, by the laws of the state of Georgia, they are half my questions, but they do come from my husband. He brought up a really excellent point, which is in a world where gold was the de facto currency, say like the dollar collapsed and then we had a de facto currency of gold, what would that look like? Would we be carrying around sacks of gold on our side like in the medieval times, or like how would that work out? Because like most people I know don't have gold.
No, I think that, you know, I don't know. I mean, the honest answer to that question is I don't know. I don't think that is a barrier to a gold standard, so to speak, though, because I mean, we've had it before, where basically, you know, your paper is backed by actual gold. And that was the original system. I mean, you had it could be gold or silver, but if you had this bill, the certificate, then you could actually go to the bank and get your physical gold. But by and large, the trade happened with the pieces of paper. I think probably more likely would be some type of digital scenario where your banking system held gold on your behalf, and then you know, it moved through electronic. And this is already starting to happen. I mean, there's a company in Canada called Gold Money, which happens to own Shift Gold, for full disclosure. There's a company out in Utah called United Precious Metals. And then there's actually a state bullion depository in Texas. And they're all working on ways to make transactions in gold and silver basically seamless, and you can buy a cup of coffee because you're trading in increments of gold. So I would imagine that it would be something along that scenario.
Well, have you guys ever read I haven't read the whole thing. I read like the first couple chapters, but have you read What Has Government Done to Our Money by Murray Rothbard?
Yes.
If I remember correctly, what we're describing is the invention of money or of paper money right now, which is, there was gold. People used gold. Gold was too heavy to carry around. People left the gold at the bank, and then they would get a receipt from their bank with how much gold they had, and then would transfer it between accounts in the bank. And so it's just, we like doing it digitally is just an update on the classic way that it was before, Nixon took us away from the gold standard.
Right. Exactly.
That reminds me of Ben Bernanke giving testimony before Congress, and Ron Paul asks him, well, if gold is not a store of value, then why do all of these world banks hold thousands and thousands of, pounds of gold? And his answer was, well, tradition.
Yeah. That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I actually just wrote an article today for Shift Gold, kind of going off of a report that the World Gold Council put out, and they did a survey of, I think there were 54 or 56 central banks that they surveyed, asking them, if they plan to buy gold in the next year, why do you hold gold? And there's a whole host of reasons that central bank hold gold, and incidentally, none of them were tradition. The most common reason was because gold tends to perform well in times of crisis. The value of gold, and really this is, that's the appeal of gold, is you can't counterfeit it. You can counterfeit it, but you can't print it. You can't just say we're gonna make more gold so that we can have more money in the system, which is exactly what the Federal Reserve does with money. So when you do have these times of crisis, and your central banks are churning out fiat currency, then the value of gold is going to go up, and more dollars chasing the same amount of gold, and that's really, that stability is why all of these central banks are holding on to gold. It's not tradition. It's silly. And now, there's nothing that says the gold has to be the form of money. There could be other things that would evolve over time. There could be some type of crypto, could be Bitcoin, who knows? The thing that we need in terms of, going back to some sense of economic stability, is we need currency competition, where the market can determine what is the best form of money. Let Bitcoin and gold and silver and dollars and yen, let them all compete in the arena of money, and may the best money win. But of course, governments don't want to do that. Governments want to have a monopoly, which is enforced by guns. And so we're stuck with fiat until it collapses. So
what was your other question, Jessica?
Well, it kind of just was like about, why do central banks hold so much gold?
Yeah, I got
But I mean, that's kind of an obvious answer. Like, they've used gold since basically money has existed. Like, I don't know what they used before gold, but it's
shells. Pretty shells.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
really,
shiny. People like it.
Gold has been a monetary metal for like 5,000 years. In some way, shape, or form. And then, of course, silver is very similar. Silver is interesting in terms of, it's a little bit different in terms of the market for silver, because there are so many more industrial uses for silver. So about 50 to 60% of your demand for silver comes from use in electronics and various other industrial applications. Gold has a much smaller base of use. It's primarily used for jewelry and for money. So the price of silver tends to be more volatile than gold. But interestingly, from an investment standpoint, when you do have inflation and currency devaluation, silver actually tends to outperform gold over those periods. So,
do you think it's because silver is more accessible because it's not as pricey as gold?
I think that's probably part of it, and part of it is that when you're having quote unquote good times economically, you're seeing more silver being used for industry and there tends to become this gap between gold and silver. It's called the silver gold ratio, and because gold is more stable, you'll see the price of silver decrease in terms of the price of gold, and then that gap tends to close when you have the monetary mess like we have now. We saw that happen actually during the pandemic. Price of gold was up. I don't remember the percentages. I want to say like 24% last year, and then silver was up significantly more than that.
Absolutely.
Money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me.
I need it, but I need it.
Yeah, I need some of that. Yeah, I need it. I was going to ask you about your project Godarchy, because it's something that's very interesting to me, being a guy with a biblical studies degree.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the God thing, especially Jesus.
Yes.
And so I was curious about that show, because I know you've had a fireside chat with an atheist. I believe you've had one with a Muslim, haven't you?
I have, and a lesbian.
That's true. That is our
Same
friend
person?
Kim.
Yeah, Kim.
No,
all right.
my friend Kim, who started the first iteration of this show with me, who I miss greatly.
Yeah.
Keep Kim in your prayers if you have the chance. Her mother is sick, and so is Mike. So keep Mike's mother in your prayers.
Yeah,
as well.
our mothers are on similar trajectories.
So keep them if you pray. Keep them in your prayers.
Sure.
But yeah, Kim's a great one, and I want to have her on the show at some point to talk about Stoicism, because I want to know. I want to know what this is, because she says that it has really changed her life, and I'm very curious about that. But I'm wondering, being a Christian anarchist podcast, how has that been received outside of mine and your circles? Because our circle is very Christian and anarchist. So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, because it's my circle.
Right.
I have gotten the listenership is pretty solid, considering what a niche type of show it is.
Yeah.
And I have gotten a lot of positive feedback. I haven't gotten any negative feedback on the show itself.
Good.
I get a lot of pushback on the Godarchy Facebook page. People want to come in and troll.
Atheists, online atheists.
Some of that. Some Christians who want to push the point that you can't be an anarchist. The whole Romans 13 thing. But no, I think it's been well received. Like people at my church that I try to explain it to, they kind of glaze over and they don't get it.
We may have some people from Jessica's church watching, and so hi.
Entirely
I'm glad
possible.
you're here.
Yeah.
I love Jesus too.
We actually brought up Romans 13 in my catechumen class last night, where we were talking about because during the Divine Liturgy we pray for civil authorities.
Right.
And the way that I've kind of reconciled this in my heart is, okay, well, first of all, you pray for your enemies. And even if you don't consider the civil authorities your enemies, you at least want them to make good decisions and be guided by something good and pure that you want, So that's how I kind of deal with that. But at the same time, I was trying to ask about, how do we reconcile that with something like Samuel 8, which talks about, the Jews wanted a king. They wanted to be like other nations. They said, give us a king, give us a king. And God is like, man, you guys do not want a king. And here are all the reasons why. And funny enough, when you look at those reasons that are enumerated in Samuel 8, it's like, this is all the same stuff the government is doing today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not one darn thing on that list that's any different than what governments do today. So God said, okay, I'm going to give them a king. They don't hate you. They hate me. This is my responsibility. I'll give them a king. Yeah. So just like, how do we square like this obedience, the idea of obedience to civil authorities with something like Samuel 8? Yeah. And something that Cam has told, I'm sorry to roll over you there. What Cam has told me is we have to understand that Paul was writing specific letters to specific people about specific events. And then everybody tries to sort of like scale this up into like modern government and modern reality.
Dogma.
Right, to suit their purposes most of the time. So Romans 13 when it's you, not Romans 13 when it's me. Yeah. And I'm just like, okay, like there's no consistency here. And that's sort of like why I get attracted to orthodoxy, because at least, there's some consistency here.
Yeah.
But where do you fall on that?
Well, yeah, I think, it's also really interesting to, I think Samuel 8, that's a perfect example. I think another really interesting thing to kind of balance Romans 13 with is go read Revelation 13. Has a very different view of the state. It's this whole idea of Babylon and worldly kingdoms. And
Nero.
yeah, exactly. And so, if you take those two, and there's a theologian that I'm really, really fond of, William Stringfellow, who is an Episcopal theologian. And he's written a couple of books, one specifically on Romans 13 and civil authority, and then another one just basically kind of, a stranger in a strange land kind of thing. But he basically makes the point in that all of these worldly governments are principalities, and they are dominated by Satan. And he says the preeminent the preeminent moral authority of the state is death. It's literally part of Satan's worldly control. And, it exists for a reason. God allowed it to exist, and God uses it for his purposes. But there's nothing in Romans 13 even that tells me that I am required to be obedient to everything that the government tells me to do, or that I am to lift it up as some shining example of
a city on a
moral
hill.
authority. Yeah, it is. It is literally Babylon. It is going to be destroyed in its time. And David Lipscomb is another theologian. He's actually one of the founders of the Church of Christ. He wrote a book that really, I think, explains this very well. It traces the whole idea of Babylon and the Tower of Babel as kind of being the first worldly kingdom, and how that basically you've just seen this power transfer from empire to empire throughout history. You go from the Babylonian Empire to the Greek Empire to the Roman Empire to all of these little empires we have today. And they are all rooted in violence, force, and coercion. And these are not Christian things. So we don't rebel against them, and we saw this example in the early church. The early church did not obey Rome. They refused to bow down and participate in the civil religion, which was, all of this pagan religion. By and large, they wouldn't even serve in the Roman military. And that's why we have martyrs, because they refused to submit to these authorities. But on the flip side of that, they didn't rebel. They didn't try to create a violent revolution to overthrow Rome. That's what the Jews wanted Jesus to do. And Jesus refused to do it. He said, put your sword away. And he showed us a completely different path toward a kingdom in which he literally submitted to death and thereby conquered death. That's the pattern that we as Christians are to follow. So yeah, I think my kind of, the personification, if you will, of Romans 13 to me is somebody like Rosa Parks, who did not obey an unjust law. But when the police came, she didn't riot and tear up the bus and hit the police officer in the face. She went to jail. Right. She accepted the punishment that was met out to her, but she did not submit to something that was unjust or evil. And, it's obvious just by basic logic that Romans 13 can't mean what a lot of people say it means when they say, well, you have to obey government, because nobody is going to say, well, those Nazi guards, they sure did a good job there.
Right.
They had to do that because that was what their government. Nobody with any ounce of sanity is going to say that. So clearly it doesn't mean absolute obedience to the state. So there must be something else. And I think there is a tension. I think there's a balance between Romans 13 and Revelation 13. And, as believers in Christ, it's not always simple. We can't boil everything down to a dogma. And I think that's really kind of this human nature. We want a list, right? We want to know that we can have this piece of paper and I can check off these things and God must accept me. And, that's the type of religion that I grew up in, a very legalistic, right-wing kind of evangelical church. And now that I look back, I realize that whole thing is really designed to control God. It's this idea is I'm not gay, I'm not divorced, and I have
Right.
not committed very much adultery, so therefore God must let me in. And that works really well until you get to the point where you can't check something off the list. And, my spiritual life fell apart when I got divorced. And, just I had to try to pretend to be an atheist for about 5 years in order to deal with the cognitive dissonance. And
I know that game.
yeah, so we have to, it's not a dogma. It's a relationship with the person, and it's not all cut and dry. And I don't have a lot of patience with people who want to, start proof texting with 2 or 3 verses that you must do this. That
Right.
makes me a little queasy.
Yeah, I was also thinking of I don't know if you guys will recognize the name, but Pastor James Coates in Canada. He was
know the
recently arrested by Canadian authorities for holding Pascha services, and they weren't able to arrest him at the church because the parishioners were protecting him. So they waited until he was driving on the highway,
Right.
and the images of him being like manhandled and carried off by police for his faith kind of lit a fire in me. And I had stopped because of COVID. I was on a church search, and seeing that passion and seeing that faith was really inspirational to me and made me start seeking out church again.
Yeah.
And so there is value in that sort of resistance. But, he, again, as you say, he didn't strike anyone. He didn't,
Right.
do any of the militaristic or aggressive things that we would associate with resisting or resistance to a state. He just, was faithful to his religion, and that was enough to inspire someone thousands of miles away from him to
Right.
seek out faith and seek out the church. And so from Perpetua in Rome right up to James Coates, we're kind of called to adhere to our consciousness.
Yes.
And I think that's why the government oftentimes is very denigrating to people of faith.
Yep.
And wants it removed from every public square and every public mention that it can, because it does have that power. Rome wasn't defeated by the sword. Rome was Christianized. The Vikings were not defeated by the sword. They were Christianized.
Right.
And it's a different method. Jesus's methods are different.
Yeah. There's so much power in peaceful resistance.
Yes.
And you look at somebody and somebody like Martin Luther King, and I'll say that, and all that damn commie, which is another subject that we could dig into if you want to. This whole idea that we're supposed to reject somebody just because that if this person, I disagree with this one thing, so everything ever that they said is wrong.
I hate
it drives
that.
me crazy. But when you look at the power of, it was sparked by Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus, and then you had Martin Luther King and others who carried that forward. The civil rights movement was by and large, from the African-American perspective, very peaceful and nonviolent. And there was so much power when you had these images of these people who were just peacefully protesting, having water cannons shot at them and dogs sicked on them and those things.
Yeah.
That resonated with people. That's what killed Jim Crow. It wasn't somebody pulling out an AR-15 and gunning down the state cops. It's not going to change anything. Violence begets violence. The sword is going to bring you the sword. Jesus even said that. You live by the sword, you die by the sword.
That's actually something that affected Jessica, because kind of with seeing the dogs attack the black protesters, Jessica saw a man attack Senator Rand Paul.
That's right.
And she saw people cheering it, and that started a change in her.
Yeah.
I was a leftist. I was an SJW warrior leftist all the way, socialist all the way. And then when Rand Paul got attacked, I saw the people around me, the people I considered allies, cheering it.
Yeah.
I said, guys, political violence is not okay. We need to say, no, this is a line in the sand. We say we're not going to cross. They're like, what are you, some kind of right winger? I was called a white supremacist apologist, which, okay, that's a lot of things.
Right.
Just for not cheering for somebody having their lung punctured because of their political beliefs. And that caused a change in me. And interestingly, just to bring it back to Christianity a little bit, it's one of the few movements in the world that thrives under persecution.
Yes.
Because when you're beating people over the head for their beliefs, not a lot of people are willing to sign on to their beliefs. but there's some quality about Christianity that the more you punish it, the stronger it gets.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that was, certainly my
It's a
case. It
refining
drew,
fire.
drew me
Yeah.
in. Yeah, for sure.
Now, on the flip side of that, I got into a little bit of. I very rarely block people from my Facebook page, but I actually ended up blocking this dude because
Oh, wow.
he was making the trying to make the case for pitching commies out of helicopters.
Mhm.
And,
Oh, God.
to me, that's no different than the left is cheering for Rand Paul's punctured lung.
Yeah, I agree.
These are human beings, and I can vehemently disagree with their political ideology. I'm not going to pitch them out of a helicopter. That's and it's not going, again, that type of violence is going to beget more violence. You end up
Yeah.
with these cycles of violence. We see it all the time. And, that's, I'm not quite a pacifist. I carry a firearm because
Yeah.
I'm going to protect my family and myself,
Mhm.
but I'm pretty darn close,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to issues of, the society in this state. You're not going to make kind of changes you want in the world by shooting and killing people. Because you're going to, even if you have this violent revolution and you overthrow the tyrant, if you're doing it with violence, you're creating it on a foundation of violence, and
Mhm.
whatever raises out of that dust is also going to be founded on violence. And perfect example is the American Revolution.
Or the
That was
French.
supposed to free us from tyranny. And yes, I do mean the American Revolution. What we have today is every bit as coercive and violent and tyrannical as King George III, arguably
Not more
much more
so.
so.
More.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you go look at Canada; they didn't have a revolution, and they're they're about as free as we are, and they have hockey. So
The best line in The Patriot is when they're doing the convention in that church, and he says, "Why should I fight? Why should I risk my children? A tyrant 1,000 miles away or 300 tyrants a mile away can oppress my rights just as easily."
yeah,
So what are you telling me to die for exactly?
Yeah.
And that every time I hear that line, it just like causes tingles because I'm like, yeah, he's right.
Yep.
We're living
And
it.
I think this actually plays well into a conversation that Jessica and I were having this morning. There was a tweet that came up where someone had wished, I'll just say wished death because I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
want to be too specific, but it was one of the things that I saw it and I was a little heartbroken to see it because I have had a kind of major transformation over the years on violence and on how I view violence, how I view even past death, if we're talking in Christian terms about how hell is and how it's written about in the Bible versus
Right.
how people talk about it, etc.
Mhm.
And so we were talking about that, and I think that one of the most important things that people who are Christian, which this is a very Christian heavy episode. If you don't like it, I don't care.
Sorry.
Too bad.
Too bad. But it's that verse, and it goes back to what you were talking about with Babylon and all of the violence and hatred and the gods of this world. We are not fighting against flesh and blood, but against
Mhm.
principalities, powers, and rulers in the dark, in the unseen realm.
Yep.
Our battle is not against people.
Mhm.
Of course, there may be defensive moments
Sure.
where we have to battle people, but
Mhm.
if we don't get to that point, I mean, I could tell you my story about how something changed me, and Jessica had a similar story. I'm sure you have one as well, but I don't want to see people in hell.
No.
I want to see the evil in hell.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I want to see it burn to a crisp and gone. That's what I want to see. Which we, let's go into it. I think I've talked about it on the show before. I had a pretty major shift in my heart when bin Laden died, which is a
Hmm.
really weird thing to say
That is a
because
weird thing to say.
if anyone deserved to die, it was bin Laden or Hitler or whoever. But I was at a Christian college and I was sitting in my room and the news came out and I got excited. I got happy that this man was dead.
Mhm.
And I walked outside and I looked in the quad and there were people celebrating this
Mhm.
man's death. And that still small voice just slapped me across the head
Mhm.
and said, that man was
Ah,
once a
the
baby.
voice.
That man was someone that I loved, that was a essentially a blank slate that evil corrupted.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
to wish him death and hell forever, is incredibly not my way.
Yeah.
It changed me.
Yeah.
Bin Laden. And Jessica was talking earlier. Hers was Saddam Hussein
Saddam
affected
Hussein.
her.
Yeah.
There was a video that had gone around. I don't know if it's genuine or not, but it was of his hanging.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of like looking at it, and then the moment where his neck snapped, I felt an incredible sickness.
Yeah.
I was like, I felt bad for feeling bad. I was like, I should be happy that this guy is dead. But there's something about seeing a human being killed that suddenly it's not, he's not Saddam Hussein anymore. He's just a man. He
Right.
was once a baby. And what I hate is the evil. And I don't hate the man. And that was rough for me. That took me a while to kind of reconcile in my heart. But now I understand that I'm not supposed to hate him. I'm not supposed to hate the flesh and blood person. I hate the
Right.
evil that was in him.
Not to mention that when we were talking about this morning, she was like, "You've told me this before, Cam."
Yeah.
Like, we've had this conversation.
Yeah.
Like, oh shoot, did I do it again?
Yeah.
Have you ever had a moment like that
I
where
don't
there
know.
was that shift?
I think for me, it was I can't pinpoint a moment. It was more of a slow burn. I was very much the right-wing warmonger. I remember very distinctly when Gulf War I started in 91 or 92, whenever that was. Dating myself. But I remember very specifically going home from work and being excited about turning on the TV so I could watch the war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Did
so
they have
that's
trading cards?
yeah, they did. They had the
Oh my God.
they had the gosh, I can't think of the word, but yeah, or was that was it the first Gulf War or the second one where they had the terrorist cards? That was the second one. That was
I think that was the
9/11.
second one. But they had they did have some trading cards for the first one too. I don't know what kind.
Yeah.
But I did hear that was a thing.
Oh, Lord.
And
All right.
for me, it was just like as my political worldview shifted toward libertarianism and eventually voluntarism, and as I mentioned, there was a period of time in my life where I walked away from God. So all of this was kind of happening at the same time as I'm rediscovering my faith. And I really came to a point in life where I was like, okay, I need to have a cohesive worldview. I think I was like a lot of Americans where everything's in its own little silo. I've got work and I've got my faith and I've got school and I've got my political philosophy, and all these things are kind of these separate things. It's like a lot of times my faith and my political views don't really mesh. So there was really a couple of years where I was really trying to kind of create a cohesive worldview. And that was one of the things that just really struck me. If I'm taking seriously this faith that calls me to love my enemies, that calls me to turn the other cheek, that calls me to pray for my enemies, to not repay evil for evil. If I'm serious about that, how can I support blowing up people I don't even know thousands of miles away? And then just kind of that, that realization, as you're talking about, that these people are human beings. These people are valued by God. They have value. They have families. They have loved ones. Even the terrorists, it's just, you can't justify killing them. And then this kind of realization, getting towards what Cam's saying, is that, if we, I don't want to get too much into deep theology, but if we do believe that, we need to know Jesus Christ, if you snuff somebody's life out, then you're denying them that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's just, for me, it was kind of something that slowly kind of came together. And then from a political perspective, this sounds kind of funny, but, it was the realization. I was the foreign policy was the last thing that I really had to wrestle with in terms of kind of letting go of my neocon days. And it was something that actually Tom Woods said in a speech. And he said, you do realize that the same idiots who are running the domestic policy are running the foreign policy.
Yeah.
And it's like, uh-oh, that, and that sounds dumb. It's like, yeah, duh. But that was something that really, it was like, oh, these people are so awful on the economy, but hey, they can run the world, realizing that the central planners can't central plan anything was really an important kind of revelation for me, to kind of get away from the war. And honestly, that's really one of the reasons that I started Godarchy as a website. Was I just wanted there to be some kind of anti-war voice that was coming from a Christian perspective, because so much of Christendom in the United States is wrapped up in the flag and cheering the next war, and that ain't right.
That was something that attracted me to my current church. I was on a church search for about 2 years,
Mhm.
and I didn't walk into a single church that didn't have an American flag in the
Yep.
nave. And I was like, yeah, turned on my heels and, and walked right out of there. And so I thank God have found one, and they actually, pray for Syria and they pray for Iraq, and
Right.
Stephen Rose of Anarcho Christian podcast.
Mhm.
He put it so succinctly when he calls people image bearers,
Yeah.
that we are the icon of God. We bear
Mhm.
his image. So when you're killing someone, even someone who's your enemy, you're killing someone who bears the image of your Lord. I mean, if that's not, I mean, I tingle when I say
Yeah,
that,
it's
because it's like,
profound.
if that's not, if that's not a sin to you, then, re-examine what you're saying you believe here.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, go ahead, Cam. Oh, mute, buddy, mute. Hit your button.
I said, thank you. No, I was going to say, to add to that, the concept of the image of God. If you actually look at the way that phrase works, it's not strictly an idea of how you are formed. It's a job. It's to be an imager of God.
Mhm.
And
Mm,
so to be an imager of God is to create. It is to tend the garden. It is to make things beautiful. It is
Mhm.
to put into the world
yes.
beauty. And so God created humans. And so if you are imaging God, you are not murdering. You are not
Right.
cheering death. You're not cheering destruction. You are creating. And I think that's something that I've talked about a lot. And I know you and I have talked about that a lot together, Jessica,
Mhm.
is our calling, even Christian or not, should be at this moment to create, to build, to make, and I say specifically yourself, your family, your community, and then get from there. It's not
Right.
my job to fix America. My
Yeah.
job is to fix me, my family, and on from there.
Mhm.
And if I can spread that example, I'm happy. But I just wanted to add that to the image bearer thing.
Yeah. Stringfellow talks about death as being the preeminent goal of the demonic. It is the ultimate of Antichrist. Jesus is life and light, and Satan is darkness and death.
Mhm.
So if we're cheering death, we're literally cheering evil. We're
Yes.
cheering the personification of evil, and the goal of Satan, whether you take that as a personified person or just a catch term for evil,
Yeah.
the ultimate goal is death and destruction. That's
Mhm.
why that's why as Christians, I think we have to be anti-war, because what is more destructive and death causing than war? I mean, this is purely antichrist and demonic. And Stringfellow
Yeah.
does a really good job of bringing that home. And he lived that out. He actually was he got in trouble with the feds because he harbored a fugitive. I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head. He was a not Franciscan. Um, he was a monk in one
Mhm.
of the orders, Jesuit, I believe he was. I want to say Brennan, but he went and burned a bunch of draft cards with napalm during the Vietnam War, and the feds came after him.
My
And yep,
man.
and Stringfellow harbored him for a while, so he got in trouble with the feds. But yeah, I mean, we as Christians, and I would suggest that for all the people that are like, I'm tired of hearing about this Christian stuff, I'm not a Christian. I mean, this is also really part of kind of the fundamental idea behind the whole non-aggression principle, which is one of the cornerstones of libertarianism, right? The idea that we do not engage in aggressive force against other people. Yes, defensive force is allowed, and as Christians, we can debate to what extent, as Christians, we would take defensive force. But I think all of us can agree, if we're libertarians, that we're not supposed to be engaging in aggressive force against other people. That's fundamental to our political philosophy. And so this attaches to that. I mean, how can you be celebrating violence, force, and coercion, and then claiming to be somebody who embraces this idea of non-aggression? It doesn't. Those two things don't work together. So you don't even have to. We can detach this from theology for folks who don't want to, don't want to go down that road.
But boy, I want to talk about theology right now. There's so much I want to talk about.
That is something that Judge Napolitano said during that wonderful speech that he gave at the Mises Institute, What Happened to the Constitution. He says, if you're going to make these arguments, you have to make them from both the secular and the spiritual aspect, because, you can't explain spiritual things to secular people. They're not, it's like the parables. They're not going to understand them.
Right.
So you have to be able to phrase these things in both capacities. And I think that the non-aggression principle is perfect for that. It's absolutely perfect. And the great thing about the non-aggression principle is that it is an axiom. It applies everywhere, even to people who aren't libertarians or people who don't even adhere to the philosophy necessarily. It plays out in our human interactions. And so it's something solid that you can point at and say, isn't it less expensive not to conflict with one another?
Yes.
If we can interact peacefully, doesn't that benefit us both? And you don't need to bring any other kind of morality or philosophy into it. Just, this is less expensive.
Rational self-interest.
Right.
But who's going to build the damn roads?
Dominoes, I guess.
Exactly.
As Eric July would say, fuck them hoe-ass roads.
No, we're gonna stand. The guy at the mall is gonna stand on one side, and I'm gonna stand on the other, and we're gonna go, well, I guess I can't get to the mall.
I don't suppose we would ever find a way to work it out if we needed to.
There's no way that we could figure out how to lay down some asphalt. It's just, thank God for this.
A great example of that is in 1912 or 1914 in Iowa. Something like 150 farmers got together and laid a road across the entire state in one day. And this is just people who got together to do this because they needed a road. They didn't need the government to tell them how and where and what. They just did it because they needed it. Recently, we had a series of storms happen in my area, trees falling down all over the place. There weren't enough government, trucks to get out there to get it out. So people went out there with their chainsaws and they cut the trees and they moved them out of the road. If it's necessary, people will do it. And if it's not, they won't. And that's just, if people want parks and roads and schools, they will find a way to pay for them. They don't need a gun held to their head in order to build a park. We'll figure out a way.
I'll hold back the theology talk. I'll hold it back. But
you can.
Go ahead. What were you going to say? I really want to talk. No, we'll get to that later. That's a whole episode. Okay. We'll plan on a whole episode for that. But what I was going to ask you was, during your time doing Godarchy and having the fireside chats and all of that, is there anything that you've learned in that time that has affected you while you've done your show?
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of there's been a number of things that have been pretty challenging. Just in terms, so I've wrestled a lot with defensive violence and to what extent that is allowable. I'd say that's probably been the thing that doing this show has stretched me on the most. Talking to our friend Ryan Burgett about pacifism, those types of things, that has challenged me. I think talking to so I did a fireside chat with the Muslim guy that runs Muslim Libertarians. And, that was interesting to kind of see from his perspective, to understand and learn just how much his religion is misrepresented by what we hear in the mainstream. He explained some really interesting things to me in terms of, you'll hear this meme, especially on the right, that, well, you can't believe anything a Muslim say because they're told that you can lie,
Right.
And that's a complete bastardization of that actual bit of theology, which happens to only apply to this one little teeny sect to begin with. So, things like that, has definitely stretched my thinking, and I've learned stuff.
This topic came up in my catechumen class last night as we were talking about Romans 13 and Samuel 8. We also talked about defensive violence.
Hmm.
And because in the South where I am, everybody's got guns and
Oh, yeah.
everybody's real gung ho about them.
Yeah.
So we were asking the father, about like active shooters in churches, which we've seen one where the shooter was able to execute 26 people before finally turning the gun on himself,
Right.
and then another where one of the parishioners was packing
Hmm.
and took the guy out. He was only able to kill 2 people.
Yeah, I remember that.
So the father told us that there are, very large Greek Orthodox churches that have sentries, and those sentries are armed. And there is this notion of martyrdom. If you die for your faith, you'll go to heaven.
Right.
But you can only choose martyrdom for yourself. You can't decide that your family will be martyrs
Right.
too.
Yeah,
You
that makes
can't
sense.
decide your children will be martyred, So that really put it in perspective for me. Like, okay, if I'm, defending others at that point, like I'm not going to make the choice for them that they should bow their heads and they should be
Right.
struck from the earth. So,
Right.
yeah, I just thought that was so interesting that all of this came up in my catechumen class last night.
Yeah.
So I actually have things to say about it. Hooray. But I thought that was so good that
Yeah.
the way that
That's
he
a
put it
good
was
that's
so
a good
good.
way to think about it. Yeah.
Because he being a priest, said, of course, I'm not going to raise my hand in violence.
Right.
I'm the head of this church. I'm
Right.
not gonna, but I don't have the right to choose that for you.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay. And he left it very vague. It wasn't like, don't
Well,
bring
and
a gun, but
I think it is, and I think it is vague. I don't think that, again, getting back to this idea of dogma, I don't think that's something you can be dogmatic about. I don't
Mhm.
know that it's, I don't know that it's wrong for different people to have, as long as you are earnestly seeking. I don't think I can say you're wrong to carry a gun, to a fellow Christian, any more than I can say to somebody who is an absolute pacifist, well, you must defend, no. I think we have to make these decisions for ourselves and find our own place of comfort and peace. And I think that as long as we're wrestling with it, I think that's a healthy place. I think we should always
Mhm.
be wrestling with things like that, that
Yeah.
we don't want to get too comfortable in our, and I have no idea, how I would react. I do carry a firearm out in the public world. But I don't know. It's going to depend on the situation of whether or
Mhm.
not I use that,
Mhm.
I always think it's fun when talking to Ryan about pacifism to ask him like the dumbest questions ever.
Yes.
Like
Right.
just for my fun, because I think one time I
You
asked him, I said,
torture him.
okay,
I know you do.
it's what I'm here for.
Yes.
But I remember one point I asked him, okay, so you're in a room with your family and someone throws a grenade at you. Do you kick it back at them or do you let your family blow up? What do you do? What do you do? Because I'm a dick.
You're the guy that comes up with like the obscure, libertarian question.
Just to Ryan. No,
Yeah.
actually,
Well,
I
always though, there's
kind of
always
hate
somebody
talking
doing
about.
that.
Oh yeah.
I just with Ryan, I kind of hate talking about libertarianism a lot of the time now, if I'm being honest. Like once you grok something, you don't really need to delve into it, till the end of time. Like there are certain things that I'm like, do I have to have this conversation about property one more time, or can we talk about something we haven't talked about before?
Yeah.
But also when you talk about libertarianism, especially with non-libertarians, especially on social media, they're like, "Oh, you're a libertarian? Solve every problem that every human has ever
Right.
had until the end of time." And you're like, "Well, none of these problems would be solved in the anarcho world or the libertarian world."
They're not
The
solved
problems-
in the world we live in now, right?
right.
I'm gonna find a quote real quick. This is my favorite libertarian quote. Of course,
Is it?
Yes.
I didn't sign shit.
on just on that note of OPSEC Drip's comment right there, that the Bible only forbids sinful and unjustified murder. When we ask for the repentance of or forgiveness of our sins, we're asking for sins that we're aware of and unaware of, intentional and unintentional. So like soldiers in a war, for example, many soldiers were drafted into wars and they had
Right.
guns placed in their hands and had
Yep.
to kill people, and it weighed terribly on their conscience.
Sure.
it wasn't as though you intended to go out and kill somebody, but you really didn't have a lot of options, but it
Right.
still weighs on your soul. You still pulled that trigger yourself. And so we can ask for the forgiveness of sins that were unintentional,
Sure.
such as. Yeah.
So this is from Robert Higgs. And
Love that man.
yes, one of
Mhm.
my faves. He said, anarchists did not try to carry out genocide against Armenians in Turkey. They did not deliberately starve millions of Ukrainians. They did not create a system of death camps to kill Jews, Gypsies, and Slavs in Europe. They did not firebomb scores of large German and Japanese cities and drop nuclear bombs on 2 of them. They did not carry out a great leap forward that killed scores of millions of Chinese. They did not attempt to kill anybody with any appreciable education in Cambodia. They did not launch one aggressive war after another. They did not implement trade sanctions that killed perhaps 500,000 Iraqi children. In debates between anarchists and statists, the burden of proof clearly should not rest on those who place their trust in the state. Anarchy's mayhem is wholly conjectural. The state's mayhem is undeniably, factually horrendous.
Mhm. Oof. That ain't the dang truth right there, man.
Mm-hmm.
And his quote about cops is also very good and quoted
know it?
often. I'll have to Google it. But no, it's the I love it. I'll Google it.
Paraphrase?
Yeah, I'll get there.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Carry on.
we don't live in a perfect world. There's a lot of times where we're confronted with choices that are not good, and none of the options that are available to us are good.
Right.
And there's compromise, and a lot of like younger people, especially like in the political realm, they're very uncompromising because they've never had to compromise.
Yeah.
And one of the big time leaders of the French Revolutions was the French Revolution was this guy named Saint-Just, and he was 25 years old, and he was
Wow.
a big fan of cutting off the heads of anyone who was impure.
Mhm.
Well, because he was a child. He
Right.
had been a schoolboy before the revolution had broken
Yeah.
out, and that was the case with a lot of them, as they were young guys,
Yeah.
and they felt so uncompromising in the way that older people can't be, because we've had to make choices that were not good. And
Right.
so I love that phrase that there are no perfect solutions, there are only trade-offs.
Yeah.
And so when
Mhm.
people confront you with, solve every human problem, like, well, I have some trade-offs. I have some ideas that might make some of us a little more free than we are now. And that's the best I can offer you.
Yeah. And that's
the way it's gotta be.
fundamentally it's economics. Economics is really what drives all politics.
Mm.
It's the fact that we have scarce resources, that we don't have everything that we need, that the world does not provide us with everything that we need. So
That's right.
the political question is, how do we best allocate these scarce resources to increase human flourishing to the largest extent possible? Anarchism, libertarianism cannot create resources that don't exist. So as long as there are scarce resources, there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be people in need. There's always going to be, as you say, that is economics. It's compromises, it's choices. My position is voluntary associations create a better allocation of resources than political calculation.
Mhm.
And that's really fundamentally why I am a quote unquote libertarian voluntarist, because I have no faith in central planners to centrally plan. They can't do it. They don't have the information. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the wherewithal to micromanage the universe. So
Mhm.
let's allow markets to work, because as imperfect as they are, they will ultimately yield better results and a better allocation of resources and more flourishing for more people than if we let Joe Biden and Donald Trump allocate the world's resources.
I agree.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I did find the quote, and I think that this is an important. It's actually an important conversation to have, because we, as anarchists, we talk about cops in not the most favorable light.
Right.
And there's this idea that people have out there that, oh, well, my Uncle Charlie is a good cop. He's a good guy. I know him. He's a good guy. He takes care of his family. But I think that when we're having the conversation about cops, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about your Uncle Charlie when he's at church. We're not talking about your Uncle Charlie when he's at home, or when he's grilling, or when he's not on the job. And this is the kind of the anarchist answer, which is from Robert Higgs, which is the good cop, bad cop question can be disposed of decisively. We need only to consider the following. 1, every cop has agreed as part of his job to enforce laws, all of them. 2, many of the laws are manifestly unjust or even cruel and wicked. And 3, therefore, every cop has agreed to act as an enforcer of laws that are manifestly unjust or even cruel and wicked. There are no good cops. This is talking about the job.
Yeah.
It's not talking about your uncle. It's talking about the fact that he voluntarily chooses to do evil to other people, whether or not he realizes that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah. It's, it's almost, I mean, you could put it this way. There are, insofar as there are good people, there are good people who are cops, but that they're not good cops.
Right. Exactly. There's that distinction that needs to be understood, because when I talk about how much I hate cops, it's not that I hate your uncle.
Right.
I don't know your uncle.
Yeah.
I just hate what they do. I hate the evil that happens, and I don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
So
it's sad though, because so many people get wrapped up into these things when they are in a place of ignorance. Especially, you see my nephew just graduated from high school, and he wants to go in the Air Force. He's going to go into the Air Force.
Bummer.
Yeah. And it's like, no. But I mean, he doesn't get it. He doesn't have the frame of reference to, and we've tried to explain it to him. My sister, his mom is somewhat like-minded. And she's certainly like-minded when it comes to the state's wars. But he doesn't know, and he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And
unknowns.
I fear that, for so many of these kids, they go in and they think, well, we're going to, I'm going to pay for college someday, or I'm going to protect the United States, whatever BS that they're buying into.
Right.
And then they come out with PTSD and maimed bodies and souls. It's a sad thing.
Do you know how fewer military men we would have if they made you wait until you were 25 and your brain's fully developed
for sure
to make that choice?
Yep.
Like, because I remember, like I've told this before, like I had a chance to join, and if I hadn't heard a Ron Paul speech a week or two before I met with that recruiter, I probably would have be living a completely different life.
Yeah.
And thank God for Ron Paul.
Yeah.
I've been dating my now husband since we were in our very early 20s, and he was considering going into the Navy. And I told him, I probably won't be here when you get back.
Yeah.
And he decided not to go. Well, we're married now. And he ended up going into private industry and is now a scientist and doing much better things for the world than he would have otherwise done as a automaton for the military.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I didn't have any noble Ron Paul-esque reasons, but I'm glad I kept at least one man out of their ranks.
Yeah,
so.
I was just outright lucky, because I was on the path to Navy ROTC. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I had some physical things that disqualified me from being a fighter pilot. So I decided I didn't want to just go into the Navy. But yeah, I mean, that's the direction that I was going to. And that's just, I mean, I had no revelation. I was like very disappointed. So.
You would be so proud of me, Jessica. I almost made a genital joke. We have gone through this entire show without mentioning genitals.
Without a single genital joke. Wow.
Isn't that
I'm really
something?
proud of us. Yeah.
I
We're
know,
usually
I
about 20
almost
minutes
did.
in and we're making dick jokes. So
we should probably end this before.
Yeah.
But so here is the thing. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. We tend to ask everyone who comes on these questions.
Okay.
One of the new ones that was added to the list was the tarot card pizza question. Jessica made a statement on Twitter, and I'm now holding her to that statement because I think it's funny and because she has to think on the fly. What is your favorite kind of pizza? And then she will tell you what that means.
What it means about you, yeah.
Favorite kind of pizza.
Like,
so
if you were to order a pizza right now, what toppings would it have on there?
All right, so I'm pretty plain Jane, or I guess plain Joe, when it comes to pizza. So I would probably do a regular or thick crust with mushroom, pepperoni, and sausage.
My man.
That is actually almost the perfect pizza without peppers on it. I would put peppers on it.
I could
But
eat peppers. I wouldn't
yeah.
order peppers, but I would eat a pizza with peppers on it.
Because you're a good man. I appreciate you.
Of course,
yeah.
of course.
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
that
so
was
I
weird. I don't understand. I don't understand.
So
how
what
this-
so basically I said on Twitter one day, just because I thought it was funny, that what you order on your pizza tells me everything I need to know about you. And it was really just to like rile up the pineapple people because they get really hairy online about their pineapple.
That's a thing.
But I am in no way a pizza fascist. I appreciate all kinds of pizza, and even pizza toppings I don't like. I'll have a slice. It's pizza. You know, that's the great leveler in the world is that we all like pizza in one form or another. So I just think that means that you are a sturdy individual who can be counted on for a good pizza. And that's what I'll say about that.
No, I'm hungry.
Do you like horror movies?
Do I like horror movies?
Yeah.
I do not like horror movies.
Really?
Do
not
you
at all?
Have you ever seen one that you did like?
Not really. It's
okay,
just...
let me reverse that. What is the one you saw that was just like, I hate this movie?
I don't like being scared.
Okay.
So anything that has the suspense element where there's things jumping out, and I don't like that. I don't like that way that makes me feel. Now, strangely enough, I do like horror books. Like I love Stephen King. So like reading, it's a different thing for me, but it's really more the thing that I don't like to be startled. Like if you come up behind me and you know, like do the, I'm liable to turn around and punch you just out of that. I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like it either. I'm the same exact way. I get really mad about it. Actually,
it's the same. It's kind of the same reason I don't drink. I just don't like the way it makes me feel.
Okay. Fair enough. That's a fair answer. We won't press them on it.
Yeah,
we have a 100 Nights of Horror movie challenge. It's the biggest horror movie challenge on the internet. It's to watch 100 horror movies from July 23rd to October 31st. No one has completed it. It's very difficult to complete this challenge. Cam is the most with 58, but that's as far as anyone has gotten. So what we're doing basically is collecting for our list that will begin anew on July 23rd.
Yes, well,
so if you don't have one, that's fine.
Fair enough. That's fine. We won't press you on it.
Yeah.
Your pizza was good enough.
Good.
But here's the important question, because
one
of the big things that we like to focus on, like I talked about earlier, is the future, creation, hope, white pills, as they call them. And so a lot of times I feel like I have to preface it every time just to make sure it's clear, because I'll say, what's your white pill? And people will go, oh, well, politically this, or in the news this, but it doesn't have to be that. What is something in your life or above, grand, global, whatever, that you feel gives you hope for the future? What gives you some glimmer of, we can do this, we can continue on, we can win in some way? What sparks that in you?
Yeah, this is going to sound weird. Sports.
Hey.
Okay. That's one we haven't had before.
Okay, but not from, I mean, I think your immediate thought's going to be like watching sports on TV. For me, it's more participating in sports and having spent a lot of time in locker rooms, because I have experienced firsthand
a lot of penises. There it is.
There it is.
Well done. Well done.
That's not
full circle.
That's not wrong, but that's not where I was going. No, you can take a very diverse and people that really have very little in common. Put them together on a team with a common goal to win this game. And you will bring that group of people together as tight as a family. So when I went back to school to the University of South Florida, I played 2 years of club college hockey. And at the time I was 40 years old. So I was like dad. I'm with all these 20, and we had guys from every imaginable background. We had a guy from Russia and a guy from Germany on the team. So we had different cultures. We had a black guy. We had people that were from the left. We had people that were on the right. We had people that were artists, people that wanted to be business. I mean, just this diverse group of people that to this day, I'm still friends with and very close to a lot of those guys. Because we had this thing that brought us together that transcended all of these other isms. So that makes me know for a fact that we don't have to be slaves to racism, sexism, homophobism, whatever ism that you want to be out there. That's not the way people are wired to think. That is a product of politics. When you put a group of people together, you gave the perfect example with when the trees are down the road. Everybody gets together and they do what they have to do to get the road clear. It doesn't matter if your neighbor's a Democrat or a Republican, or if they're gay or straight, or all that stuff is not important when you are working towards a common goal, when you have true community. And I've seen that true community in a locker room, so that I know that it can exist, and people can come together and work together toward common goals, towards human flourishing, without having to have all of this political crap shoved on top of them. I'm convinced that most of the division and strife in the world is caused by the fucking politicians.
All politicians are bastards.
Sociopaths.
It's so interesting, because when we talk about politics, the team sports analogy gets brought up so many times. It's almost second nature to associate it with the political duopoly. But you've put team sports in a whole new light in that way, and that's beautiful. That's a wonderful hope pill for me.
You're not murdering your opponents. You're beating them, and then you're shaking hands most of the time afterwards. In hockey, you may be fighting in the middle of the ring, but hey, that's the draw. That's what white people bring to sports.
Right? Funny story. I got to be pretty good. So I had a brief moment where, little known fact about Mike Maharrey, I was actually a professional athlete for a very, very brief moment. By professional meaning, I signed a professional contract. I never got paid because I got cut the night before the first game. So it was a very short. This is actually professional roller hockey, which was a thing in the 90s. But I got to be friends with them. So a lot of these guys were from minor league ice hockey, and they played roller hockey in the summer to stay in shape and not sit around and get fat. And there was one of the guys that I got to know pretty well was a quote unquote enforcer. So he's one of the guys that would go out and fight. And so I got to kind of the inside look at the job of the enforcer. And you would literally see these guys, get in a fight, and then they go have a beer after the game. So, it's not a personal thing at all. It's part of the dynamics of this game, which we could get into a whole episode about hockey enforcers and violence in hockey, but we
should probably do that at some point, because I feel like that is more interesting to me than some of the things that, I'm not trying to be mean, but I've heard a lot of things where I'm just like, why are you talking about this? And that's
it really is quite fascinating. Back in the early days of hockey, the way the enforcer, the best way to put it, it's like taking the steam out of a pressure cooker. And by allowing players to kind of police themselves on the ice, it kept a lot of really nasty, dangerous stuff out of the game. And over the last 10 or 20 years, you've seen a move away from fighting, and they've tried to get that out of the game. And as a result, you've seen a large increase in nasty stick work, hits from behind, things that if you did that back in the 80s or 90s, some big goon would come beat the hell out of you. And so there was an incentive to behave yourself on the ice. It was like, kind of so it is a really interesting dynamic. And if anybody really wants, if you want to get into it, there's a documentary called Ice Guardians that I think is on Netflix. That you can check out.
I saw a clip from a hockey game the other day, and this guy, he was shooting the goal, and when he hit it, his stick hit the ground and broke. And so, but he made contact with the puck. So the puck was like scooting across the ground, and the stick that had come off was flying past the goalie's head, so he thought that was the puck, and the puck just kind of right into the goal. And I was like, this is
Nice.
some good stuff. I don't know
Yeah.
why I enjoyed that so much.
That's that's a thing for a goalie. So I'm a goalie. I know about that. Any movement that's why a lot of times, if you get a guy in front of you and he swings his stick, it'll just that little bit of motion will take your focus off the puck. And when the puck's moving 80 miles an hour, you don't have a whole lot of room for error.
You're still playing hockey in Florida, right?
Mhm.
How's that going? Because I know you had some hip trouble at some point.
Oh, I still
or
have hip-
something trouble.
Yeah, I have arthritis. I have pretty significant arthritis in one of my hips, which makes it a challenge. I take a lot of CBD and do a lot of stretching, and I'm too stubborn to quit. So
Hey, I actually respect the hell out of that. Like
Yeah.
so much. I'm sure that there are people out there who'd be like, just it's like me and motorcycles in a sense, because like I'm not going to stop riding a motorcycle, no matter how many
Yeah.
people tell me not to. I'm going to still ride them. If I die, I die. Hello, Jesus.
You need you need things in life that are your own realm and domain. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like, I do politics all day, every day between shift cold work, 10th Amendment center work. I'm constantly immersed in news. And then of course you got family stresses. Going out on the ice is the one place where I can block all of that out and focus on this one thing. It's really actually very important to my mental health to have that outlet. And I don't know what I'm going to do when I can't play anymore. I'm going to have to
Yeah. You're going to
figure
ride a
out something.
motorcycle.
Maybe I'll buy a motorcycle.
But no, that's the same for me. I have told people, like, there's the meme that white men would really blank instead of going to therapy. But it's true. I would much rather ride a motorcycle than go to therapy for that same reason. Because when I'm riding a motorcycle, for one, I'm paying attention to everything around me.
Mhm.
So it's like transcendent. Not to
Total
mention,
focus.
yeah, if you want to understand the place that you live, ride a motorcycle, because you'll smell the honeysuckles,
Mhm.
but you'll also smell the rotting fish. Like, you know where to go. You can smell the different area. Like, there's something so beautiful to it. And the fact that you're thinking and you're working at, full bore, but at the same time, you're thinking of nothing.
Mhm.
And there's peace. And I can't imagine something better than that, because it's a way to disconnect from the rat race,
Yeah.
as it were.
You should try stopping a hockey puck.
I think that I should. but I'm 32 and I've not been on the ice since I was probably 16, so maybe
Yeah.
not.
I'm looking
maybe
forward
not.
to your forthcoming black eye.
Who? Mine?
No, his.
Yeah.
If he decides to try to stop a hockey puck, I am looking forward to his forthcoming black eye.
Well, you
'cause I
do
will
have
make
a
fun of it.
beautiful thing called a mask.
That's true.
Oh yeah, well,
Yeah, I've been
if
playing.
you're some kind of pussy.
I've
I
been
am
playing.
so
yeah.
anti-mask that I won't wear a goalie mask.
I've been playing
I
most
don't-
of my life and have never had a facial injury. Knock on
That's
wood.
Nice.
That's why you're
Yeah,
still
I've
so
had,
no,
I've
beautiful.
had a
seriously, it's-
concussion, but I've never had like a cut or like anything like that. I have all
Hmm.
my toofuses.
Good.
That's good, because I
For a
have
hockey
known
player,
hockey
that's good.
players
Yeah.
that don't have. Well, they're not goalies though.
No, but in most hockey players, most like in NHL, they only wear the little half visor that comes down to their nose. So I mean, yes, it gets a stick up or a puck up. I mean, I get hit in the mask probably on a weekly basis. But
Right.
now think about those guys back in the 40s and 50s who played goalie without a mask.
I
Mm-mm.
can't. I
No.
can't.
That's insane.
Should I
Yeah.
float that last question I asked you that's very uncomfortable and put you on the spot again, Mike? Do you
I don't-
remember?
I don't remember what it is, but we could do it. It'll be the last thing, and then I'll go. 'cause I gotta
It'll
go
be the
to bed.
last thing, and then I'll tell everyone where to find you.
Okay.
What's your favorite thing about me?
My favorite thing about you.
About me, yeah.
Huh. That's a good question. What if I said there isn't a favorite thing about you?
I think. Well, see, I've asked you this thrice. I think so. This is the third time. The first time you said my beard. Second time
I
you
do
said
like your beard.
that I'm good people.
Oh.
And so I'm just wondering, Is there a
Well,
third answer?
the first thing that came to mind, and people are going to think this is weird, but I think you have a sweet spirit.
Oh, thank
Oh,
you. I mean, I also
yeah,
have a
no, he
very
does.
mean
That's
spirit
true.
at times.
Well, no, we all do. We all do. Believe me. You should come inside my head sometime. That's not a place anybody wants to be. But no, um, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I
So
appreciate
that's
that.
my answer.
Well,
I don't remember you asking me that question, to be honest with you. I blocked
it's
it. I blocked the experience out.
He
I
does
love
it
it
just to
so
torture
much.
people.
It's that because the sweet spirit always bows to my interest in trolling someone. But
Yeah.
with that, I will tell people where they can find you. If you want to bow out after that, after you're able to add whatever I missed, you can. Or if you want to listen to all of my bullshit after that, you can do that too. Up to
Yeah.
you.
I'm gonna go to
Um,
bed. I know
yeah,
it's like I'm old. It's like 9:40. It's time for
I know
bed.
that's why we did this at 8 because
And it's
last time I did
very
it at
much
like 10.
appreciated. Yeah. Yeah.
I like to respect my elders. So if
As
you
you
want to
should.
find Mike on Twitter, go to @Maharrey 10th. He works with the 10th Amendment Center. Speaking of, if you don't pay attention to what they do, you should.
Absolutely.
10thamendmentcenter.com, or they have a Twitter as well at 10th Amendment Center. Your boy Mike is an author. He wrote a book called The Constitution Owner's Manual, which is right behind him. And you can get that on Amazon. I don't know if there's a better place to get it, but I know it's on Amazon.
You can go
So
to constitutionownersmanual.com and it will show you all of the buying options, which include Amazon Kindle paperback. You can get a signed copy directly from me. It's also available as an audiobook. And if you're at all interested in what this Constitution was supposed to be, that's the book for you.
awesome. Also, if you want to see what else he's up to, michaelmaharrey.com. And if you're not listening, if you're a Christian and you're not listening to Godarchy, you're a bad Christian. If
Yeah.
Aw.
if you're not a Christian, you're not listening to Godarchy, you're missing out on a perspective that you either haven't considered before or may have blotted out. And Mike is a very great person to listen to in these ways. He's articulate, he's intelligent, and he brings the meat. So listen to Godarchy.
Second one.
Is there anything I missed? Oh wait, Schiff Gold's Gold Rap podcast.
Yeah.
Friday Gold Rap podcast. Also, the name of your interview show should be The Golden Hour with Mike Maharrey.
Yeah, actually, we've finally settled on a name
What's
for
that?
the show. It's going to be called Gold Exchange, an interview
Oh.
series by Schiff Gold, or not
Nice.
Gold,
I like
Metal
that.
Metal Exchange. Gold Exchange was the first
Like
idea,
your
but
Exchanging. I get it. I get it.
yeah, see, clever.
Yeah.
And so we basically I had some other ideas that I probably would have gone with, but the bosses had to sign off. So
Well, I tried to get out there. I just got it out there too late.
yeah.
So I appreciate you, Mike. I enjoy it every time you come on. I like talking to you, which is the conversation we had before we got on here. Is I just want to talk to you. I like you. That's the conversation I want to have, and I've enjoyed it. So thank you for coming on. We'll have you on even though you didn't choose a horror movie. We'll do this again, and you can pick the topic, and we can just talk about that the whole time. Does that sound doable?
It's either going to be hockey or music.
Hey, either way,
Both.
Or both.
Yeah.
we can do that. So with that, I will move into my boring stuff, and you have a good night.
I'm gonna
Thank you,
peace
Mike.
out. Thank you guys. I do. I appreciate you. This was fun. This is a unique format, and it was cool. We talked about a lot of stuff.
Thank you.
It
You
was
have a
nice
good night,
to meet
man.
you, Mike.
You too. You too.
All right. And so people who are sticking around, if you don't know where to find us, I mean, do better. Like, I'm on Twitter at Cam Harless. I'm trying my best not to say bad words. I'm failing terribly. Jessica's
Swear
doing
jar.
a little bit better. You can find me at Cam Harless. You can find Jessica at Soup Canarchist. We have shirts, as she showed you. We have tanks. We have t-shirts. We've got hoodies. We've got pop sockets. We've got everything. There's also, I'm going to give you a little preview here. If you go on to wearethemadOnes.com/store, you can see the shirts that I've already put up for our 100th episode. A little teaser for what we have going. I meant to share that tonight, but you know what? I forgot. and that's okay. We'll do it the week
Get it
before.
on the next one. Yeah.
Our 100th episode is not next week, because next week we have Maddie from Voluntary Vixens. After that, 100th episode. I do have something planned. Let's see if it works out. But beyond that, we'll figure it out. If you aren't following us on Rockfin or on Odyssey or YouTube, you should. All of those, just type, well, actually not Odyssey. Odyssey's a little annoying. You have to search for the Mad Ones there. But YouTube and Rockfin, just / the Mad Ones. That's the easiest way to get to it. We also have, like I said, we have t-shirts. I'm going to say that again because I'm excited about it. We're themadOnes.com/store. If you want to listen instead of watch, which is dumb because look how beautiful Jessica is. Why would you not want to watch, you ass? You can go to wearethemadOnes.com and listen directly there. You can also on any podcatcher. But here's the deal. Only the last 10 episodes can you get to without, I mean, I'm trying to keep the show going. And right now I don't have a job, guys. So
Aside from torturing me.
That's true. That's the best job. If you want to, you can listen to the last 10 episodes for free. Otherwise, you can go to Rockfin or to Odyssey and get to them that way. Rockfin is $9.99 a month, and you don't just get us. You get Monica Perez in the Propaganda Report. You get Sam Tripoli and his different things he's working on. There's a lot of stuff there. My friend Whip and Spoon signed up for Rockfin and got rid of Netflix because that has been more entertaining to him than Netflix, and that's saying something, I think.
I mean, honestly, like if you're a fan of like Jimmy Dore or Tim Pool, any of those guys, anything that they have that gets removed from YouTube is still on Rockfin. So that's the place to go, man.
Yeah. Not to mention that we are now on Patreon. So if you want to support us directly with cash, you can do that. We have tiers. Some of those tiers come with some parties, some live streams with just us talking. Also, the higher ones, you get Zoom calls. Hell, if you give me a certain amount of money a month, I'll give you my cell phone number. I swear to God, I'll do it. No, I won't.
And he'll give you feet pictures.
I might give you feed pictures. That's an option. But last two things I want to say. If you aren't listening to OPSEC Drip on YouTube, it's a 1-minute show each week. The dude's great. He brings you one story from an actual newspaper and tells you what it's about and what he thinks is coming. And if you like coffee, get some coffee from lorenzotti.coffee, which Jessica is always drinking on the show. It may be tea, but hey, that's what we're telling people.
It's coffee today.
Oh, good.
There's no more.
Oh, good.
But
lorenzotti.coffee.
We'll say the Mad Ones eventually.
Eventually, I'll get it figured out. But when you go there, make your order, try it, throw in promo code the Mad Ones. But every time you reorder, use the same promo code. Get 10% off. Helps us out every time. So don't just like it and then continue buying it at full price. Keep throwing it in there because I've been told it works each time.
Every time.
That's true.
Yeah. No, I use it. It does. It does. And if you order a big enough bag, they send you a little personal note thanking you.
Nice. So do that every time. That helps us out. One of the things I like to do, I don't know if you've noticed on Twitter, if someone comes on the show, I like to send them a shirt. That pays for the shirts. That pays for the little bit of, hey, thank you for coming on our show every time we have one. Do that. Beyond that, I've got nothing. You got any last white pills for people? Anything that you want to share before we go?
Oh, I don't know. Just, guys, we have that horror movie challenge coming up starts on July 23rd. If you have any movie suggestions, it's always a challenge to put together a list of 100 movies that we've never seen before. So, hit me up on Twitter, send me an email, leave comments in the comments section, whatever you do, and let me know what your favorite horror movies are so we can get them on the list.
And with that, we will release you from the torture that is our show, which I think is pretty good. I hear good things.
Only 2 dick jokes.
Just 2. Just 2. I mean, and it was like well into the show. I mean, you have to be proud of me.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, as I like to say at the end, I didn't say who's coming. Maddie, 100th episode. Then the week after that, Nick Ashley. And then
Oh,
July
yeah.
7th, Shane Hazel's going to join us.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you need to know. With that, be the glitch you want to see in the Matrix.